Calendar year 2025, we completed 4 internal recruitments and 1 external recruitment. That resulted, 3 of those recruitments resulted in promotions of existing staff. And 1 vacancy remained open at the end of 2025. That resulted in an ongoing recruitment. We have now filled that position and the new employee will begin employment at the end of June. In calendar year 2026, we have recently recruited for a senior or associate engineer. And that resulted in us not hiring anybody, and we will again be recruiting for that position in the upcoming future, probably in the next month or so. If approved today, we will be recruiting for a lead maintenance mechanic. That will be an internal promotion for one of our current and existing maintenance mechanics. When that promotion occurs, we will then be recruiting for a new maintenance mechanic. We, on a regular basis, update our policies and job application description. And our recruitment challenges generally consist of cost. I see you smiling about this. Cost of living in the Truckee area. That is quite often something that applicants will talk to me about. Concerns related to driving and or living in the snow, and the increased desire for remote or hybrid work. Because we just did a recent class and comp study, we are aware that T-TSA offers competitive salary and very good benefits package. With that said, we recommend that we conduct the public hearing, which we're doing on the status of vacancies, recruitments, and retention efforts at T-TSA. Any questions?
Any public comment? Public is hearing for today. Excellent. All right, we'll close the public hearing here at 9:08. All right, we have a motion to file AB 2561 annual vacancy rate report.
So moved.
All in favor? Catherine seconded. Oh, sorry. I was moving quickly here. Seconded by
You're
Catherine.
doing a good job, Kirby. You're doing a good job.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Well, Vicky, since you're still there, you're not going to do the next thing at the agency classification, description, salary, schedules, and the org chart.
Wonderful. Thank you again. So the maintenance department recently ran a voluntary and temporary pilot program. It was pretty cool for the staff that were able to participate. It was voluntary. Staff were able to go on 3 months working on class assignments. They learn new skills. They learn what it means to kind of dabble in the whole supervisory process. It ended up being successful, and we're now going to add a permanent job classification for the maintenance mechanic if approved today. The department has also opted to restructure at the same time, with the inventory control specialist now reporting to the maintenance supervisor. So by doing all of this, we are not increasing any full-time equivalent employees. Rather, it will just be promotional opportunities and then filling positions that are promoted. With that said, we recommend the approval of the updated classification descriptions, salary schedule, and organizational chart.
Just to be clear, we didn't have a maintenance supervisor or inventory control specialist position before, or we did?
We did and do have those currently.
Okay.
However, by again, just adding this new classification, the department also opted to move some staff around at the same time. So inventory control specialist currently reports to the maintenance manager and will now report to the maintenance supervisor, which is an existing position.
Okay. Any questions here at the board? Any comments? We have a motion to approve the new and updated agency classification. Includes the descriptions, salary schedule, and the chart.
So moved.
All All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
you.
All right, moving right along, Jason, to you on the strategic plan. I know we spent a lot of time on it last month and you had,
That's okay.
good Terry, so we'll let you present again.
So effectively, I incorporated the changes that were kind of mentioned during the last board meeting, and hopefully you had an opportunity to look through it in your board packet and see if there was any other input anyone had, but I will just say that substantially nothing was changed. There was some wording added, there was some clarity provided, and there was some I guess, directional reasons for some of the goals a little bit specified, but as far as what we're going to be achieving and how we're going to achieve that is not changed. So I'm open to more input if necessary. Otherwise, I'm asking for approval.
Has there been any public comment on the plan? Any commentary by the board? Any additional changes to be made or refinements suggested?
I appreciate the refinements. I think it's better. There was one place where it looked like the words were just being repeated in a couple of spots. I don't know if you would address that at all.
Yeah, so there is, the challenge associated with this kind of planning is the fact that you're going to try and address as many of the larger functions as you can with as few actual steps as possible. So there will be a lot of carryover, and in the prior iteration of the plan, unfortunately, it just said "see above," which is very not refined. So as part of that, I did what I could to wordsmith it and try and kind of it's still kind of "see above" because it's part of the same plan. But one aspect I believe that was mentioned was the section risk-based goals. Cost control oversight. So as part of the CIP plan that's already been provided, one of the refinements that we want to incorporate into the CIP plan itself is an individual project-based, I won't call it a discussion, but some kind of a metric associated with cost control. And we wanted to use that as a component of prioritization. So there's an aspect of, when things are high priority, they get bumped to the top, and sometimes cost controls can be kind of forgotten about in the process because they've been deemed so critical that, oh, well, I guess we don't have to worry about cost. So we wanted to incorporate that into each individual project, but we also want to have kind of an overall concept associated with the CIP and in some respects, the budget, that is a narrative that relates to the entirety of the plan. So cost control being important for all aspects of the plan. This one, I believe, was specific to affordability, long-term sustainability. So there is some level of redundancy. I can maybe work on wordsmithing it a little bit and maybe just ask the board to approve, but with the incorporation of some minor tweaks.
Okay with you?
That's fine with me. I mean, these are
Yeah.
your ways of achieving the goals and objectives that we as a board have set. So I think we look forward to, hearing the reporting back. I don't want to nickel and dime this thing at all. I just noticed that the exact same wording was in two places, and so I just get all that.
Any other commentary?
Comment.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the strategic plan?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, our illustrious CFO is going to take us through the budget again.
Again. Good morning, again. Okay, ready to go through the budget? I can tell by the eager looks on your faces, you read every single page that I included in that packet of the budget, so I appreciate that. The game is also always on for typos, so I do always appreciate if you're pointed and I've missed something. And I will address two typos that I should have corrected, and one pushback, so we'll get to it. It will be a fun presentation. So taking a look at our first slide, again, overall, the objective of the budget is to deliver a balanced budget that makes sure that I'm doing my job, that responsibly funds our near-term operations, executes the priority capital projects that we've talked about in the CIP, and really preserves our long-term affordability and resilience. Key messages throughout this: financially disciplined and sustainability. We know that we have a very large project coming down in the next few years that we're going to have to pay for. It has been time to tighten the purse strings. We have been doing that. We will continue to talk about how we're doing that. Executing priority capital, shifting from planning to delivery. And I'm waiting from a smirk potentially from one of the board members, because then I've been here. I've stood here and said, we're going to spend, we're going to spend, we're going to spend. And then we haven't. We're finally at that point where we're ready. Planning has moved to the point where we're going to start spending and doing so. It's very exciting time. And again, reliable operations and an aligned workforce. We do have an aged facility. That is not new news. Things break that we don't plan for, and we need to have the budget resiliency so that we can react to that. There are a few housekeeping updates, narrative updates. I have presented to you the budget book. It is not the final budget book. You'll notice words like projection, anticipation, expected. Once we have the June 30 actuals, the numbers will change to the actual reported numbers, and all of those words that are future projecting will change to actuals. You'll also notice that a few sections have been added to the budget book this year over prior years, continuing the alignment to apply for the GFOA prestigious budget award. The other addition is the goals. You all just accepted and approved the strategic plan. We worked diligently to try to overlay, sometimes a little too obviously, so I'm still finessing some of that language, how that particular part of the budget supports the strategic plan. Okay, before we dig in, are there any high-level questions? That's silence, let's go. As a reminder, we introduced the financial planning cycle when we did the CIP earlier this year, and we are kind of rounding the corner on the bottom there. We're in that annual budget May-June timeline. Service rates will increase on July 1, and then when we get to the fall, we'll start having future CIP conversations. But I just wanted to center us where we're at. So taking a look at the next slide, that's the sources and uses executive summary. It has a nice narrative that's included in the budget book that talks about it. Overall, the takeaway is that our operating expense is approximately $23 million. The numbers that I presented to you all in May have been increased by $2,500. It is decimal. It did not change anything, but we did add in 2 laptops for the SCADA team, and that wasn't included in the dollar amounts presented to you in May. There were no other changes. Continuing down here, our capital expenses are consistent with the CIP with one minor change, and when we get to the CIP table, I will point that out. It was a reduction, not an increase, so that's an excellent story. And you can see that our debt service is slightly increasing, and that's because we issued some debt in January, and we're going to have to make a payment for it, as well as finish out our 2020 bond issuance in this year. Okay, let's take a look at the details and a little bit more information. Table 1 in the budget book goes over all of the revenue sources that we have coming in. We anticipate $34.1 million coming in. And last meeting, one of the feedback that I received on this was that I do have it listed as a budget request for this revenue. And it truly is a request at this point. The request word will come away once you all approve it. It will just be the budget. But you do have the ability, the Prop 218 notice and the ordinance that out there isn't up to. And so there is the maximum up to amount that's illustrated here. Again, all of the increases are as planned in our current ordinances. And the one-time and variable revenues that are there are other revenue, temp discharge, interest income. Those are conservative so that we don't anticipate getting revenue that we don't see. Questions on revenues before I take a look at overall expenditures? Keep plugging along and look at table 2. Table 2 presents our operating expenditures by category. All of the departments are added together. This again is painting that picture and showing that long-term financial sustainability. Our workforce readiness is planned in here. We continue to have training and conference budgets. You will notice a theme throughout the book where we talked about a reduction in staffing. We're preparing for that future clean water revitalization world that we'll be living in. And we really wanted to take a look at what the departments need right now, not what we were told or thought that they needed in the past. Taking a look at the next slide, there's lots of words. I won't read all of them, nor will I ask you to read all of them, but what it does in short, it points out that we are working in keeping the operating expenses at about a 3.78% increase. It's predictable. We looked at essential cost drivers, there's COLA, we had to inflate for insurance. We didn't take on new programs or new challenges in this budget. But as I mentioned earlier, we did allow for funds that if antiquated or older assets outside of their useful life break, we need to be able to have the funds to react to that. Again, that's that long-term financial sustainability. As far as workforce readiness and organizational effectiveness, which is goal 4 from you all, that's that investment in staffing. It's looking at the staffing, it's making sure that the current staffing is prepared for the skill set level that will be needed when we are in clean water, when we have revitalized the clean water, I guess we could say. So we definitely want to be mindful of that. We've also taken a look at strategic goal 5 for that infrastructure reliability and resilience. You've heard me say increases in SCADA. We have additional staffing in there. We have additional equipment. We're putting additional resources there. That was a big theme of that to get ready. Again, the unplanned repairs, we have to be ready to react to that. Questions on the overall expenditures before we take hopefully a quick look by department. Next slide. Table 3 in the budget book has an update. It is wrong in the printed material that you have. So thank you for that catch. But the administrative budget that says is $5.7 million. While that is correct, that $5.7 million also includes the 1.2 retiree medical expense that is outlined at the very bottom of this same table. So you'll see in the updated version that gets published, this table now ties to that $23 million in operating expense. I had just made a calculation error and included it. All right, let's take a look by each department. Again, as presented in May, this is the budget for the administrative department. The takeaway that I want to point out here is that staff was reduced. In the FY26 budget, there were 11 full-time equivalents, FTEs as I'm calling them in the budget world, 11 positions. We're down to 10 positions. That administrative assistant position that was not filled was removed from the budget. I'd also like to note here that all of the positions that we talked about removing from the budget were vacant. We are not working anyone out of a job. They were truly vacant positions. Questions on any of the admin increases or changes before we look quickly at the operations department? Right, let's go. Taking a look at this slide, there was no change to headcount for operations. The increases related to this have to do with that investment into staff. We wanted to ensure that everyone in that department had the opportunity to have a CWEA membership. There was some underspending also that you'll notice in the operations budget. And part of that was money was there to replace a filtration asset, and they found a workaround or an alternative that didn't require the replacement and was much cheaper. And so that amount did not need to be carried over to the budget. Let's take a quick look at tech services on the next table, table 6. This is another area department where headcount was reduced. In the FY26 budget, there were 11 positions that were included. Removed for FY7 were the engineering technician position, the lab technician position, and a senior engineer, as Vicki noted earlier. There were reductions, again, related to the reduction of the headcount. There were also things that were included in this budget last year that we're not doing in FY27. One of them was an office reorg plan for about $100,000 for some cubicle redesign that we needed. We wound up not needing it. We found an alternative, and that budget wasn't necessary in this year. All right, maintenance. Let's take a look at table 7. This department moved from a headcount of 17 down to a headcount of 15. It was the elimination of the E&I tech position, again, that was vacant, and the CMMS technician position. As noted earlier in the presentation, we did add a maintenance lead to this. That did not add headcount. It will be taken from existing MEC 3 headcount. This is also the budget where I noted that there were some increases due to the maintenance need to respond to outdated assets and having that flexibility. So you may see an underrun in it this year. It didn't break. Odds are it will break next year, and we need to be prepared to take care of that. Before we switch to talking about capital expenditures on table 8, are there any questions on the overall operating expenditures or the breakdown by department? Right, go. So I did tease and say that there was a change in this. I was gonna ask if anyone could find it, but that would be too fun for me. There was a removal of the very last line item. There was something in the equipment program that's called a Brit classifier replacement. I was able to say that and not get tongue tied, so that was an improvement from last time. It's in the CIP for $350,000 and it was scheduled as a pay-go. We've removed it and it will be factored in through the next CIP process and become a water plant project and we'll have a full PDR. It just won't be considered an equipment replacement. So that caused the overall CIP to be reduced down to $21.5 million. Everything else is still consistent with what you all accepted in the CIP document earlier this year. Questions about CIP before we talk a little bit about debt service in the future? Let's keep going. Well, this is a new slide for the budget. You've seen it before. It has a very Gortler feel to it. These are our debt service projection payments that you saw as part of the bond presentation. This is a graphical representation. And the reason why I like it is look at all that white space. You see all that white space out there in the next few years? That gives us capacity. That means we have the capacity to hold debt to pay for our clean water revitalization project, our digestion improvement project, which are the two projects we anticipate being debt or outside funded. Now, just to show you that we don't stop looking as of June 30, 2027, if you take a look at the next slide, this chart is taken from the CIP, and this is to show you that while we're talking about a lot of spending in this year, we need to be cognizant of what's happening out in the future for that long-term sustainability. These are our operating projections and our capital projections. It also includes debt funding. The purpose of this chart is to show you that that very bottom number, that debt coverage ratio, is still extremely solid through this entire process. We want that number to stay above 1.75 times. That's what the rating agency will take a look at. We are maintaining and hopefully surpassing our current rating so that we can achieve a little bit cheaper debt next time we go out there. The other takeaway from this is things are stable. We have had a lot of up and down. Again, as I led into this presentation, we've been telling the board for at least the last 3 years that I've done budget that we're gonna spend. We are actually spending, and this is reflective of what happens when we do that spending. Questions on the future before we do just a couple of more budget charts?
I do think it's interesting. So we're potentially going up to like $9 million of debt service a year by the end of this 5-year period.
Yes.
Just something to know.
And it is something because we don't have a final cost for clean water revitalization. I'm planning worst case scenario and hoping to deliver best case scenario. But I want to make sure that with that long-term sustainability, if that number comes in higher, then we're anticipating that we're ready for it. Other questions, comments? All right, let's talk about our unfunded liability for retirement. The 2027 payment is $1.8 million. One thing you will notice, and it took me a couple of years to remember this, is that we budget the full payment. As long as we make the payment in the month of July, we get a slight discount. So you'll always see in the budget to actuals, we come in a little under, but based on cash flow, we want to make sure that we budget the full amount in case we're not able to take advantage of that discount. And taking a look at the valuation that supports these numbers, the retirement plan is approximately 80% funded, which is a great story. We need to continue chipping away at this, and you'll notice that that unfunded liability amount increases over time. That's to be expected. We'll continue to have conversations on how to fund this. Right now, it seems prudent to fund it by paying the UAL annually, taking that little bit of discount. But as we wade into the future, we're going to need to have conversations about how to get that 80% up a little bit higher. Well, that was a lot of words and a lot of numbers. Let's wrap it all up and put a bow on it. My takeaway, short and concise, we've been planning, we're now going to start doing. I'm still going to be here to plan and talk to you all about that. So we can make sure we have the finances ready. But this budget really gets the team ready to start doing. The roadmap is becoming more clear, and it will get clearer throughout FY27. Again, one of the common themes was a headcount reduction. So I do want to take a moment to nod to staff, because they're doing more with less, and they're able to still get the work product done. Because we've eliminated those positions, we're not meeting complaints. We're still meeting them. We're still getting our reports done. We're still getting our job done. We're still treating the wastewater. And we're able to do that because everybody that is here has stepped up and raised that bar. So I greatly appreciate that. With that, I will turn it over for any additional questions on the budget.
Bill,
No questions. Good job. Good job, Missy.
Thank you.
I've got
You guys.
some commentary to make.
Gotcha.
I think it's good that we're only 3.78% over the prior year budget. Obviously, we're way higher than what the projections are, mainly because of labor and there was class and comp over 2 years. And our wonderful health benefits. I just want to highlight to the board that employee benefits across the board are increasing at 2 to 3x the rate of inflation. That's going to continue. We're seeing it at the other agencies here in the valley. It's not sustainable. Now, granted, there are things changing with the Pepper people taking over from the classics and all that stuff and people paying part of their pension and all those things. But things that just keep on your radar, that's something that I don't foresee her environment getting any better. I think corporations are going through it as well and they're passing that more along to their employees and that's pretty normal. I think overall, the budget looks pretty good. There's nothing really outrageous. I just wanted to comment on the big increase over what the projections are, because it is not a small number. Just so everybody understands, there's reasons why that is. Okay. That's my only comment. Do I have a motion to approve the budget for next year?
I make that motion and we approve the 26-27 budget.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion
Thank you very
passes.
much.
All right, capital reserve fund budget.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere for any more items. Then I'll sit down and come back so you don't get bored with me the whole entire meeting this time. All right. Let's talk about the resolution number 5-2026 that revises the wastewater capital reserve fund budget and makes related findings. I love when we set ourselves up to continually update things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the purpose, but I will set a teaser. When I get through with this slide, before we talk about the actuals, I do have 2 edits to the resolution before I ask for approval, so I don't want to lose sight of that. But why are we doing this? Why are we talking about it? First, this is standard. We've done this every year since I believe 2008, maybe even earlier. But the wastewater capital reserve fund was established to keep track of money that's collected from sewer connection charges, because we need to keep it separate. When you hear me talk about our reserves, this is the restricted part of our reserves. We can only spend it on specific things. The fair share costs that determine these prices came from a March 2019 HDR study. Our ordinances have since updated the rates based on inflation, but it has not changed that fair share methodology. The resolution before you will allocate the FY27 budget for PAYGO capital expenditures and debt service related to the 2020 bond issuance. You may be saying right now, well, how come it's not the 2026 bond issuance that you just told us about? Because we're going to be paying for that differently. We invested that money, and the money that money's making will go ahead and make that debt service payment for us. That's why it's not included here. There is also a provision in this resolution that this money can be used for emergency use if you have an uninsured emergency or catastrophic loss related to capital facilities. I hope that we never have to do that portion of it, but it's nice that that's written in there. I have told this group, and we've had that finance committee, that we are doing an upcoming rate and connection charge study. As part of that study, we're going to be reviewing and evaluating nutrient loading and hydraulic capacity as we define our EDUs. That conversation has the ability to change the actual fair share costs and how they are calculated. I'm not saying we're changing it, I'm saying we need to have that conversation about it. So more to come on that. Questions about why we're doing this before we get into the particulars of the this particular resolution?
I'm curious why we do it every year.
It is my understanding we do it every year as part of the budget. It is the budget gets approved and then we go ahead and outlay this. I do know that from the 2020 bond issuance, there's actual language in the covenant that requires us to have this set aside this way. So that's a portion of it. As far as the other history is how we started, I don't have that intro right now.
Yes, normally it get folded into the budget approval.
So could I take this as a recommendation from the board that next year we can have a budget action item that has a couple of points to it? And
I
either
think
we
so.
approve the budget and we take care of these housekeeping items.
I'm in favor,
I'm in favor. I love that. That's a great suggestion.
indeed.
All right. Got it. Okay, let's take a look at what we're actually asking you all to do today. As of May 31st, that was the last month end date that we had. That's why it's that date. The balance in that account was approximately $18.5 million. Funding is sufficient to spend or to have our FY 27 capital projects. It's about $800,000 is the slice for this, as well as the $2.2 million in debt service for the 2020 bonds. We do not need additional allocations to this fund. If we did, this would be the time where I would say, hey, we need to take money out of the general fund or Fund 6 and put it here. That is not the case. We have plenty of money. This is a routine action, as we noted. It's procedural and ensures compliance with agency requirements. And I love the recommendation to make it a combo with the budget action item next year. So before I actually ask for approval, I did not do a sufficient job in reviewing this. Michelle did a very sufficient job in writing it, but it used to point to something called Exhibit A. Exhibit A was the page in the budget book that talked about what projects we were doing because we didn't have a CIP. So in item 2, I remembered that we had a CIP and I nailed it. There are 2 or 3 other references to Exhibit A that I did not catch. So before the president is asked to sign the resolution, assuming to approve it, we will make those edits to the actual resolution. Questions on the edits or any of the math before I ask for approval?
I have a question. It's overfunded. What do we do about that over time? Change it into future rates and then work it down? Just curious.
So remember the point a minute ago where I talked about in the future rate study, what we're going to take a look at? That's kind of one of the starting places. We've also talked as an agency if there is an appetite to further discuss with legal in all of the applicable agencies if there's a different way to spend this money. It is my understanding right now that the understanding at the agency is it can fund about 1/3, 33% Fund 6, or the rates fund the balance of that. I think that that's a conversation that we need to take to Finance Committee and look long and hard, because you're right, there's $18.5 million sitting in there to be used for growth.
Yeah, well, maybe we're gonna grow with this new plan we're doing.
Interpretation.
Indeed.
So it sounds like the board maybe has the appetite for that conversation, and now I need to get legal on board to have the appetite for that conversation.
Yeah, let's have a finance discussion on this with Josh and
Okay.
look at it. I need to tie up $18 million and raise 18 million debt at the same time.
Sure. Other questions or comments before we ask for an action?
Anything else? Oh, good.
Just one thing. So in the resolution, we do reference the CIP, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the point of what the projects are, and it talks all about that. I felt that was more appropriate, it's more robust conversation than just including the list of projects as we had in the past.
All right, do we have a motion to approve resolution 5-2026, revising the wastewater capital reserve fund budget and making the rate of finance?
Yeah, I make that motion.
Second.
Favor?
I,
Aye, motion carries. Okay, appropriations limit.
It's resolution.
Yeah, resolution is roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. Roll call, fine.
Director Fox,
yes.
Director Wilkins,
Yes.
Director Hansford. Yes. And Director Clune.
Yes. Now we can go to appropriation limits. You really do all the math on that formula that was in there?
Well, someone at the agency did the math and I looked at it. But yes, we did. We've been counting it since the 80s.
What a nightmare.
So again, I call it a housekeeping item. It is a requirement. I love including it with budget action, because it stems from that. In short, state law requires us to set an appropriations limit each year. It is also reviewed by our auditors each year. We have successfully passed that test every single year. Resolution 06-2026 adopts the FY 27 limit. We have to do it at a publicly noticed meeting and a regular meeting. So had you rescheduled this meeting, we wouldn't have been able to hold this item right now. The FY 27 appropriations limit, the calculations included in your packet, and it totals approximately $4.9 million. Just as in the last action, it's routine, it's procedural, and it ensures compliance with state requirements. So the action before you is to approve the appropriations for FY 27.
Any questions on this?
Yeah, so this sets the maximum amount of property tax we're allowed to accept. This is the gap limit, right?
Yes,
For the-
yes.
What is our annual property tax? Could you remind me from the
The
budget?
budget is $5.5 million. Are you noticing right now they're not the same number?
I'm noticing that we're adopting an appropriations limit that's less than the amount of property tax we're expecting to
Yeah.
receive.
Yes. I should probably have a good answer for that, shouldn't I?
Mhm.
Let's go. In that budget line item, you'll notice it's called tax revenue / ad valorem. We have the ad valorem and the appropriated amount. We've also noticed over time, we continue to get RDA pass-throughs. I wanted to make sure that we preserve that amount in the budget and didn't exclude it and force additional charges over to the sewer service charges. So that's why you see a $5.5 million anticipated revenue source from there. There are additional monies that we get that are outside that ad valorem. It is primarily been RDA. Or it may be a timing situation where we are on the teeter payment, right? So sometimes that last payment doesn't come in until July or August. We don't accrue for it. So in some years, we have slightly more budget than we do appropriations based on capital receipt.
So it's the ad valorem in the middle. That-
The appropriations, 4.9.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so it's something I'd like finance committee that we just review in a little bit more detail
Absolutely.
for next year.
It's higher than that.
Usually it's significantly higher.
Right, exactly.
Correct.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I agree. Sorry.
Yeah, but there are things you can do to take out certain capital project costs, et cetera. So I think there's background calculations. So there are that we're not seeing here.
Right,
But I would like to
that's,
go over that with finance committee.
all right,
It is on the agenda for the August meeting.
excellent. Any other questions? Okay. Then do we have a motion to approve resolution 6-2026, establishing appropriations limits for fiscal year 26-27?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Second, anyone?
Second?
Okay, we'll do a roll call.
Director Cox?
Yes.
Wilkins?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Okay, before we move on here, Mr. President, I've got a question for the board and staff and Lizzie. You don't have to go back up
You
there.
got it.
You based all of your findings and all the calculations on the HDR study from 2019?
Yes.
Do you think it's time that we might re-examine
Yeah,
our projections, seeing how HDR's study is 6 years, 7 years old?
you can add that to the finance committee agenda. Let's do that. Good idea.
I mean, you know, things change rapidly and, I don't know your numbers and calculations, Lizzie, but the data that you're, assuming these calculations on, is becoming a little dated. And I think it might be time to get old Sean Corn back up and review where we're headed here.
Good idea. We will do that. All right, moving on. The Clean Water Revitalization Project preliminary design workshop.
Morning, board. I know it's now full. Scott Fleming, Technical Services Manager. And today with me, I have Tim Loper with Corollo, just a reminder for everyone, he's our principal in charge for the project. And Dave Ewing with Ewing Construction Services, he's serving as our constructability review lead for the project as well. That'll be answer any questions you guys should have as I walk you through an update. So today's presentation is meant to serve as, I'll preface this with just a high level overview of what we did at our camp process, or as Corollo calls it, it's a collaborative approach to multidisciplinary planning. They don't like to call it a workshop. It's a place we get things done. So with that said, I will say that we do intend to come back to the board with PDR as well as a more detailed walkthrough. So just kind of caveat that for board saying today, I'm going to keep this rather brief. So yeah, camp was a 4-day long intensive multidisciplinary design alignment session. We brought together a bunch of different stakeholders for the project, engineers, architects, O&M staff, and went through pretty much all of the project elements. The goal of this is really to kind of flush out some of the outstanding items out of those design memorandums or DIMs that we've been talking about that had multiple alternatives to really kind of nail down what the preferred alternative for the agency is from constructability, safety, cost, serviceability, universe of concerns with it. And then to expedite 30% design deliverable. And so with that, we document all outcomes out of the camp. We did this process previously for the evaluation we did last year, and I think Director Fox, you sat in on one of those sessions, I believe. I'm not mistaken, 1 or 2 days of those sessions. A couple. So this time around, staff and the consulting firm focused on doing those and then coming to the board with a study session later this evening. So just as a reminder, if you want to jump to the next slide here, this is an overview, and I know it's kind of hard to see on your screens. It's in the alternative process evaluation. It's the recommended alternative. I just wanted to briefly kind of touch back on it to remind folks, because it's been a while since we looked at it. Not a lot has changed. Really downstream of the primary clarifiers is where the work is intended to occur with modernizing the agency's facilities for a biologically focused treatment process using a 5-stage activated sludge process or BART info process with membrane bioreactors. In order to have those membrane bioreactors, we need to install 2mm perforated plate fine screens upstream of the biological process. And then we need permeate pumps downstream of the membranes to pull through the membranes as well as discharge to the effluent field. And then one other thing in here is there is a design memo too related to disinfection. So currently we're using sodium hypochlorite, 12.5% as our disinfectant. As this project is being designed and constructed, there is serious concern, as we had allocated in the CIP years out many years ago to look at UV. The time's come to do that dim review now. So Corollo provided that and will be part of the PDR of that evaluation of life cycle costs that will walk the board through. So right now they're showing investable UV on the process flow diagram. On the solid side, in order to ensure that we can sequester phosphorus, they have that sequestration facility as well included. Otherwise, we'd be recycling back into the head of the plant our centrate that would be ammonia rich and cause problems for us. So a little more detail on each of those facilities. I pulled some screenshots from some of the camp slides because I think photos are usually a little more fun and illustrative for everybody. So the direction out of camp is that the preferred technology for the fine screens would be an inclined drum screen, 2 duty and 1 standby required for the hydraulics with the facilities. And as I mentioned previously, these would be at a minimum 2mm perforated plate. You kind of, when you go smaller than that, there's hydraulic issues that don't really provide additional benefit for moving inorganics out of that process from the primary effluent head upstream of the bioreactor. So that's the sweet spot. We reviewed the process flow diagrams, the hydraulics, our equipment options and facility layout. And so in here, these screenshots show in the upper right corner the hydraulics that Corollo walked us through. They also did the hydraulic modeling. I think, Tim, this term CFT modeling, or I was trying to remember offhand, it was mentioned that you guys.
Computational fluid dynamics.
CFT modeling, there you go. So that was a screenshot pulled from that that's been run to ensure that we have good flow through. And then the inclined drum screen, that's kind of a screenshot from one of the manufacturers of what it looked like. There's a couple options for manufacturers that we put or equal into the contract terms. This would not be a technology we need to sole source. So yeah, the influence coming in, you have a screen basket and a spray bar, and then an auger that carries those inorganics up into a chute in a press zone for dewatering it into a bin, and the cleaner water passes through the drum. So any questions on the fine screening system or why it's needed before I move to the next components of the project? Okay. High level too. I know it's still, I'm trying to stay high level. I was told 15 minutes.
Fine, this is Scott high level,
Yeah.
okay, so just, you want to go disappear as often.
I can skim higher if we want, but I was told 15 minutes is what I was given.
That'd be a quiz at the end.
Yes.
For computational fluid.
Yeah. And I still, we want to talk constructability with these guys too, so, and some other alternative stuff. So, so on the next slide, not too much has changed. Still 3-pass bioreactor system. In the upper right corner, you can see that where you've got different zones. I'm not going to go into what those accomplished in this meeting or time for the sake of it. But we looked at those bioreactors, the sizing, with the hydraulics, the mixing, pumping, chemicals, aeration, et cetera. Really honing in. I think we've got a pretty solid bioreactor setup going. I think there's a general consensus. The more the discussion revolved around annual servicing required for takedowns and safety related concerns for staff on that. So removable ladders and harnesses and those conversations were really focused in on at camp. But overall, we're pretty concrete at this point, I think, with the bioreactor footprint sizing and basins for the facilities. On the membrane side of things, we still are on the hollow fiber membrane train here. It's really best footprint and bang for our buck. We confirmed the redundancy and sizing needed for current needs and build out phasing as far as how many membrane cartridges to install. There were a lot of discussions related to the tankage and the adjacent return activated sludge pumps, RAS pumps, and whether those should be in the soup, as we would say, so submersible pumps, or if they should be dry pit submersibles where staff could access them without having to hose them down first. So that was kind of a conversation point. Permeate pump gallery layout and being able to pull permeate pumps were worked out during camp, and we're looking for a revised layout from Corolo out of that, as well as blower placement, chemical service layout, and HVAC support. So one of the biggest discussions point right now is when you build a building in Truckee, this climate is quite challenging for air conditioning and heating as far as the loads go. And with the size of this building in particular, getting a certain number of air changes and meeting temp is a question point for us. So there's some options still being fleshed out of camp related to whether or not we're going to fully enclose the building, or if we're going to do removable panels, or if we're going to do doors so that we can minimize the heat and air conditioning loads to keep the costs down for the project while still having the building operational and serviceable. So that's a big touch point for us on that component for the membrane building. And then on the UV side of things, really our only option here is UV, you've got open channel, or you've got inline, meaning in pressurized pipe. In our case, since we're going to the soil aquifer treatment field, we need to maintain pressure. We don't want to break to gravity, so that really eliminates the open channel UV design system. So we are looking at what they call like an inline UV system, which would be that you basically keep using the permeate pumps the pressure through the UV system reactor and out to the disposal field. And they'll walk us through at a later date those detailed life cycle analysis they did with that versus chemical usage for disinfection. And so during camp, we talked about the design criteria, the couple manufacturers out there, the cleaning requirements, and then there's these lamps or bulbs that you have to replace for UV. And so how those would be serviced and the electrical requirements associated with the facility. Any questions on, that's kind of the heart of the project, if you want to describe it as that. It's really the bread and butter here. I don't know whether or not you want to use, but
You've got more.
yeah, I've got yeah. Any questions on that?
There's still more work on whether you're gonna go the UV route or the chemical.
I mean, the recommendation out of camp and staff are on board with that is that the UV does pencil out when we look at the life cycle cost analysis relative to sodium hypochlorite. Something I will mention to the board is we talked to Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility, and T-TSA somehow or another managed to secure a lower chemical contract for sodium hypochlorite for this annual cycle compared to them when I spoke. But those are wildly variable costs that could drastically impact us on an operational standpoint. And so Corolo built that into their life cycle analysis. I don't know, Tim, if you want to add anything to it with that, but it really shows quite clearly that there's a large capital overlay up front for UV, but when you bake in the life cycle cost of it, it's pretty clear what the best direction is for the agency if you want to look at it holistically, but it would add project costs.
Does UV add electricity costs?
It does. That is correct. Yeah.
But in general, electricity costs are, increasing at an understandable rate as opposed to chemical costs, which can vary. And one of the main objectives of the project is to reduce chemical costs and the dependency on chemicals. And so this UV recommendation does achieve both those goals.
Yeah.
What's the price cap on the capital side?
For the UV system on them, we haven't seen a revised estimate yet. We're looking for that out of the PDR. That's part of DIM, I want to say 7 or 8, which there's still a few design memos that are outstanding on this time. Yeah. Oh, DIM 9 is the construction cost estimate. I think I can't remember if there was a preliminary cost provided in the original evaluation, or if I don't think we dove that.
No,
into
We
it.
can, we,
I'm not going to throw that number out.
Yeah.
we made some assumptions for CapEx for the life cycle cost analysis, and it is substantially higher than chlorine disinfectant.
The initial cost estimate, as I remember, was 264 million when we had our first camp.
The whole
Our
project.
first camp meeting, that was over a year ago.
Right.
Now, Scott, it sounds to me like you had a camp meeting with Carrillo and staff. Is there gonna be another camp meeting that the board can participate in?
So, yes,
I mean, we're moving along here. It's been a year
yeah,
and, I'd kind of like to, know what the projected cost increase is, after a year. And, I'm not reviewing my notes, but I was pretty locked into that 264 figure. And, I was just wondering where we are standing after 1 year of, a more in-depth analysis of where we're headed.
I want to answer
So,
that.
so Dan, what the current plan is right now what we're doing through this process is refining and creating the preliminary design report. That's gonna give us the foundations for moving forward to the more advanced design. At that point, prior to giving the board the PDR, I would like to have a really intense meeting with the board as a study session where we can bring in some technical subject matter experts. We can have Liz, we can have discussions about the entire thing, talking 3-4 hours kind of time frame where we can really intensely dig into this, make modifications to any assumptions that we want prior to bringing the PDR for approval. Our intent is once we have a checkpoint with the board, the PDR, we will, as staff, know what the direction is. And at that point, the assumption will be there's going to be very few, if any, substantive changes to the project. PDR should lock it in.
What's the timing on that?
PDR will be delivered in the October, September timeframe.
So we're talking this
August.
late summer, August.
Yes, sir.
I would suggest you add in there also the ongoing costs to operate, because that was
Oh,
also
that's-
of the
yep.
discussion we had a year ago. And yeah, it costs this, but it's gonna cost less here and more over here and there. Yeah, we have to look at all the things.
Yeah. And again, those things get refined, and once we make certain assumptions, then we can make those calculations. And so, it's gonna be a back and forth. It's gonna be an intense day. Lots of diagrams like these.
The last one I'll add on the UV2 is the proposed location is in the basement level of that facility. So in either case, we're going to be running the permeate outlet piping through that area, and there's spare space that's not planned to be utilized as support for the facilities above it are required for the blowers. So we're not adding any new buildings or constructing new buildings for the UV system. It's just repurposing space for it, and whether or not the board green lights that portion of the project capital expenditure, we're still going to have that space set aside for a future project so that we could do it at a later date. But I will say we will end up paying more at a later date.
I think it's likely to assume at this point that staff is going to come forward with a recommendation to move forward. You will get sticker shock from the CapEx. We'll be prepared for that now, but we believe that there's value in the life cycle cost analysis, plus in a marginal improvement of our quality. One of our kind of watching in the future type limits is TDS, and tied to TDS is chlorides. There is no way to treat for those. You have to run RO to remove them. This offers us an opportunity to eliminate a source of TDS and chloride because sodium chloride adds both. Not a ton, but if we're down to a razor's edge and TDS is one of the limits we're scared about in 15 or 20 or 30 years, future us will greatly appreciate this decision. So we'll provide more information, but don't be surprised if staff come back.
Any other comments, questions? Scott?
Scott's got more.
I got more.
No, we're done.
Okay.
Yeah, 15 minutes.
I know, right?
All right, well, you have to. Tell me.
So on the solid side, just keep going, you know.
Wow, all right. Note to self.
There's only like 7 more slides.
Maybe. So on the nutrient, the alternative process evaluation, one of the additional components that was required for the project to ensure we can hit our effluent limits is phosphorus sequestration. This is a large component of what we do currently through our chemical treatment process with phosphorus stripping basins and the chem treatment trains with hydrated lime. Those are the facilities that are really quite challenging to operate. They're also 1970s and early 80s, and the concrete on many of those facilities is crumbling. So with that, how that system works, and Cole walked us through it. So on a super high level, after we digest our sludge, we'd be sending it over to a reactor that adds air and magnesium chloride, which is basically road salt, to it, and a controlled reaction that precipitates out that phosphorus into a granulized pellet that looks, they call it struvite. And then that struvite is bound up in that cake that gets dewatered and hauled off. So currently, we take our chem sludge and we dispose of that at Lockwood at the landfill. Instead, this would bind up that phosphorus primarily in a struvite form that would be hauled to Valley Ranch as part of their composting process. Michael has been pretty keen on this one. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Something else? But yeah, it's a very interesting process, and staff did tour the facilities in Salt Lake this past winter to check it out and see how it was operating for them. There was one other competing technology, but it would have been installed one, and considering our technical limits, it was too great a risk. So they walked us through the design criteria and the requirements for us to size the facility appropriately for us for our digested sludge transfer rates and all that. So we don't have ripple effects with the digesters or with the dewatering pills. Trying to keep the project boundaries in check so they're not creating additional work or impacts downstream, upstream these processes.
Did you mention this true formation that could happen if you don't remove this, that can impact? That's another reason why we went, not just to meet the discharge requirements, but during the digestion process and dewatering process, if you don't remove the phosphorus, you can get the struvite forms on its own at equilibriums with magnesium, phosphorus, and ammonium. And those can form in areas you don't want them to form, and they can cause equipment failures and stuff like that. So it's not just to help us meet our discharge requirements, it's also to help us control the struvite formation so we can remove it in a safe manner that doesn't affect the equipment.
On the electrical side of things, we had a very involved conversation with their lead electrical engineer, Bondman, yeah, and Paul and our E&I staff, as well as with regional stakeholders. So Truckee Donner PUD did come out to talk to us about the plans for the project. Paul led that discussion up during one of the days of camp with them. So that utility coordination is starting to spool up to ensure that what we're planning to build is supportable from their end as well. And so with that, there's a whole series of things, and on a skip in the surface here, we have 3 existing generators on site. One of them is completely decommissioned and out of service. The other is on its last legs, as it seems like as of lately with some of the failures in 2027 with it.
It's aging, and we're still able to run it, but it's gone. It served us well over its useful lifespan, and we can continue to run it until the project is in place.
Yeah. And the final third existing generator on site was put in during the 05 expansion. That generator is not appropriately sized for this project's needs long-term. We need to go, it's one of the big things. So with that, we do need to have backup power to maintain treatment during quite regular losses of power that we see throughout the year around here, which is kind of a unique thing that the consultants don't necessarily see most other places. So with that said, there was discussions on generator sizing. We're looking at 2.5 megawatt generators. The direction is to have 1 diesel generator and 1 natural gas generator. Even though it's 2 fuels and it adds some complexities that would allow the agency to have a little more resiliency as fuel prices fluctuate in certain markets, as well as the ability to run the natural gas generator as the primary generator and the diesel being more of a backup generator. We can't just do natural gas generators, as NFPA does not allow us to be. We have to be in control of our fuel source in the sense to be able to provide backup power to the facility. So if we don't have a diesel generator, we're not going to pay for emergency power needs. And then we talked about interconnection, switchgear, transformers, and on-site fuel requirements for how much backup power do we need before we call for a fuel delivery if we didn't have access to.
Would this be affected by whether we go UPM?
No, it did not seem like the sizing of the generators was impacted regardless of the usage. The biggest consumption of power for the project is going to be pumping and aeration. So The return flows required to send back is something around the order of 3 to 4x of the overall flow. So if we're pushing 4 MGD through the plant, the return flows have to go back between 12 to 16 MGD depending. Is that
That's right.
yeah? And on the blower side, this is the trade-off is you move away from a chemical treatment process, you're focusing on more of a biological process to encourage the growth of the organisms. You need to have the air in a controlled set and you're basically controlling that reaction. So the power needs are going to be basically offset, or what we're looking at is a very close or similar loading requirement between our current power needs at the facility, maybe a slight uptick depending, but we're going to have more efficient equipment, but we're going to need more power to power the air pumping required for processes. So, yeah, that touches electrical. Is there any other questions on that component? Trying to see the surface here. All right. So site architecture. So we did have the architect MWA with us, Trevor. Forgot his last name. Fritz, very nice guy. But we talked about trying to blend old with new here. You know, you tour enough of these facilities and you see just stark differences through the phasings of the projects. Obviously, it's a unique look around here with the plant. Some people love it, some don't. The intent isn't to choose materials that have not served us well in the past. So Calwall for skylighting is really not preferred for staff, as well as EPDM flat roofs have been challenging for us over the years with leaks over critical facilities. The architect understands that. So they're looking at trying to find that striking balance, and the hope is by the study session, we'll have some nice renderings to present to the board that are still currently in development. With that said, one of the other project components that we haven't touched on much, but we had $2 million allocated this past fiscal year for a lab rehab. Staff recommended to the board that we hold off on spending that money and look alternatively at serving the lab long term. So we have a shared fund right now in the admin building that's not up to current code requirements. And rehabilitating the lab in place and bringing it up to current codes is not feasible. That was confirmed by Corolla with the architect during this project process. So their recommendation was to construct a new lab, greenfield it, and also so we don't impact the current lab operation and have to outsource all of our sampling. While we do that project, there is also lead and asbestos abatement that would be required, so we'd have to vacate the entire building here. So they recommended with all of those challenges, it was much more straightforward to construct a new laboratory. Additionally, as part of the original baseline scope, an ops control room for the new processes would plan to be put inside of the membrane bioreactor building. However, a further evaluation has determined that having a controlled space that meets current code requirements or habitation for a full-time office space was not recommended to put in a process area for a number of reasons, because then we have to have additional controls in place. So like basically harmonizing that with the laboratory in the same building was recommended by the architect in Corolla. And lastly, one of the other components of this project that popped up was the question's been asked at site security standpoint and at future proofing the facilities. We're talking about Dale's point, building a $260 million facility, but we do not have an ADA accessible tour available or learning center for these processes in place. And so with that, the question was asked and something to further discuss whether or not it makes sense to have a boardroom and public lobby accessible outside the plant fence line that could be secured so we don't have the public driving through the facilities unescorted, checking in for tours and having a learning experience to come in on long-term. Right? So it'd be a way to give back to the community at a small cost relative to the overall project to construct a boardroom and a front lobby that are facing and publicly available with the public parking lot. So more to come on. And I threw a teaser name out there, but we have no call that facility. Questions on that one?
That's an ad, right?
The boardroom component, the lab is scoped in project to do for the design and construction and the control room, just the boardroom component. And we're going to need restroom facilities for the lab and the control room anyway. So we're talking about adding on a singular room and the necessary support infrastructure for it.
Yeah, I look forward to this conversation.
It's thoughts right now. This is the first time you're hearing of it, so I'm trying to gauge your reaction because I didn't get
Reactions, no, not a good idea.
Keep them coming through the fence line.
No, look, I know it's a small cost to the total project, but we're gonna get to an outer limit on And we're gonna have to pick and choose what we need to have. And I'm hearing scope creep and increases pretty quickly here. So I think you guys are gonna have to have the bare minimum and what you'd like to have, and then we gotta decide in between with Liz running all the numbers on $5 trillion worth of debt that we might need to have to cover it. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, so I was gonna wait for.
Oh, yeah, we can wait till the end, yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So,
It's a good process.
yeah, as far as the key technical discussions, I'll hit on this quick. I won't spend most of the time on constructability since we have Dave here. So, yeah, overall, we reviewed process systems, mechanical, electrical, architectural, and safety and code. I'm not gonna read through all those bullets. If you guys have any questions about them, feel free to ask me. But on the constructability side, this is kind of one that was saved for the last day. It's a key component of the project is the risk associated from during construction for what things need to be mitigated, what risk do we have. So there's a risk register that Corollo developed and went through with staff that was populated. And then we really turned to discussing the traditional design bid build
Sorry.
approach to the project. And I'll turn it over to Dave a little bit. I didn't throw any of your slides because they're pretty detailed for this setting, but if you want to touch a little bit on what we spoke about during camp?
Sure. So in the traditional design bid bill, let's just use an example. Let's say it's $100 million job. That'd be wishful thinking, but let's say it's 100 million for round numbers. And contractor gets probably 8 weeks initially to bid it, maybe adds another 2 weeks because of addendums. So they get 10 weeks to totally understand Corollo's design and presentation on a very large project. And even when you self-perform the concrete and the mechanical and the piping, you subcontract out at the sub-tier level with suppliers and subcontractors, $65 million of the job. On any treatment plant, it's usually about 2/3 of the job. So 65 million, you start soliciting those prices to other people that are seeing the job for the first time. And then on bid day, about $50 million of project, you have no idea who your sub-tier participants are. An hour before the bid, you have no idea who $35 million of the participants are. 15 minutes prior to the bid, you're still ironing out major subs. And it's like the stock exchange on the worst day. And and then if you're the low bidder, that's the good news. The bad news, you have to build it with people that maybe you've never worked with before. It's work. It worked with Slayton in 2004. Slayton's an outstanding company. That's the pressure Slayton was under on bid day. Now, California is way behind other states in alternative delivery. This past January, the governor signed SB 598, allowing construction management at risk. What that does is it flips the dynamics completely around to where usually at the 30% design, you have selected a CMGC firm based on quals and performance and their staffing and their approach to the project. And you execute a phase 1 services for a low dollar amount. You're not committing them to build the project. You're committing them to give you real-time costs, to get cost certainty earlier, give you real-time schedules. And if you want to know what that boardroom costs, you're going to get a much better number than you would waiting until the day of the bid as a bid alternate possibly. I think it's a great way for a project of this size, particularly this complexity with this seasonal and constructability issues. And I think the concerns I'm already hearing from the board would be well addressed with this alternate delivery. It's new to California. I do it a lot in Oregon, Washington, Arizona, and Texas. They're far ahead of us. And in Arizona and Florida right now, they hardly do any more hard dollar bids on a job this size. You won't even see it. They're all doing alternate delivery. So if, from a risk standpoint and locality, if you think you could do it, I think it'd be a good way to go.
So you're saying getting these folks involved early
Correct.
and they know one another.
Correct.
They iron out all the kinks before they go pour that concrete and make a bobo.
Right. Yeah. The big difference, if there's any one takeaway between the two, is the first option, you get all low bidders. You get the low bid general, you get the low bid everything. In this option, you get the best value at all levels. because you can select who participates. And you, as an owner, participate in those award decisions of major suppliers, whether it's UV, this electrical subcontractor, rebar, you participate in those decisions.
And our team can manage that project at that point.
After attending one day of the camp, I'm totally confident of that. And the other thing is Corollo being nationwide, this is not their first rodeo.
That's the standard delivery that we do in Arizona and Nevada, all over the place. We've done it.
They'll bring a lot of expertise that would be very helpful. And,
Okay.
Let me add one thing. The key piece of this too, Bert, is that you get this thing called the GMP, which is the guaranteed maximum price.
Okay,
And
so
so
not
now
to
ahead of
exceed,
time, this is how much they are going to spend. This is the price certainty that you were looking for.
right.
unless there's change orders and all that stuff. That
Yeah.
gets looked at.
Usually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because usually in this delivery, there's less change orders.
Less.
Because when you have 8 to 10 weeks to quantify work, you're gonna make mistakes. When you make a mistake, that's fertile grounds for a claim. And,
As we move forward with this project, very little has been said about odor control. And I know one of the first camp meetings we had, we discussed having the facility all enclosed for protection from the weather. And we addressed condensation and how you deal with condensation with the operation. But nothing has been said about odor control. And I'd like to know what part of this movement is odor control going to be addressed?
I can start with that one and I'll leave it off. So Corollo's been monitoring H2S, which is one of the primary contributors to odor at our primary effluent. So the facilities that are currently tied, we have odor control on site. We have 2 biofilter fields that we have blowers to. The biggest concern on this project from an odor is from a standpoint is the fine screening facility, which is planned to be tied into that odor control. So during camp, Corollo walked us through the piping connections to that. On the bioreactor side and the membrane side, at that point, I mean, from most facilities, we've toured the odor wall immediately adjacent to the bioreactors and the membranes is slight. Once you get more than maybe 20, 30 yards away, there's no real odor. So the intent is not to tie odor into the bioreactors and cover them or the membrane facility, primarily just the fine screening facility, which presents the largest risk with primary effluent of having odor associated with it. And even still, we're getting at least the second round of testing that I heard from Ricky Gutierrez was still nils on the primary effluent side of things on our H2S monitoring. So we do plan to tie it in, and use existing odor control facilities as a cost saver. Corollo did have an alternative to look at having an on-site scrubber immediately adjacent to the building, but the cost and the recurring media changeouts were not preferred for staff. It was more expensive and we had a recurring headache item. Our biofilter field is pretty passive, where we still have plenty of capacity that was assessed by Corollo and looks good for the primary effluent as far as it goes to the fine screening. Did you want to add anything else to that? Does that answer your question, Director Cox?
Yeah, so basically the money we spent, I don't know how long ago, a few years ago with the odor control, we'll be able to tie this new existing MBR into that and be able to augment any shortfalls with some new technology or
So,
the existing technology and just adding on, or?
so we have capacity. Sorry. I'm not problems. Talking there.
No, you're not.
So we have capacity on our existing biofilter
Okay.
field to tie in new facilities to it. And we are planning on tying in some of the facilities, specifically the fine screening facility, but the bioreactors and membranes, there is no plan to tie them in, as we are not concerned about those facilities. Based off of the H2S testing that Corollo has been doing on our primary effluent. And I do not anticipate our constituents and our wastewater to dramatically change based off of our customer base. If we were tying in some kind of customer that could potentially create a larger hazard, and even then I see Jason in the face. Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think the short answer is we're aware of where odor could be a problem. We're addressing it through engineering controls.
There you
I mean, we're not ignoring odor, so it's definitely on our radar.
All right, let's wrap this up, please.
You got it. All right. So if there's no other questions on constructability, so next steps, right? So Advancing camp outcomes towards the preliminary design report. We have some action items and data requests and coordinating information to Ferrolo. And some outstanding questions from the workshops that I touched on. We're still awaiting the preliminary cost estimate and the risk construction sequencing. And then, as Jason mentioned, the intent is to come to the board with a study session to review all those project-related decisions and additional scope items and get direction from the board, and then finalize the PDR and move the 30% funds. Other questions?
Big deal,
Officer.
big deal.
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, largest project that we'll ever deal with as a board. You know, we've got a very knowledgeable staff, very knowledgeable technical team. The question in my mind is, as we're being asked to effectively lock in the project scope at the PDR stage that's kind of what we're working towards, is whether or not it's worth putting some additional resource into additional expert peer review on where we're at. Because we're not that, you know, we're not wastewater plant operators or designers or experts. We've got a great team. But when you bring other people with similar levels of expertise as we have with our design team in to look at it from a kind of a fresh eyes perspective at a higher level, sometimes you'll find opportunities there for cost savings, project improvements, et cetera. And it takes time and money to do that correctly. So it's not just, you know, call your buddy and ship the plans over to them. It's a more, what's that?
You're gonna be very involved.
It's a more significant effort, but it's at a higher level, but it's, you know, because I appreciate that we would do the workshop with us as the board. I'm not going to be able to provide meaningful input at the technical level, you know, talking about, gee, do we really need one generator or two? Do we need a boardroom? You know, how much redundancy, system redundancy we really need? You know, those kinds of questions I may be able to have an informed opinion on. But there may be other opportunities for us that we're not seeing, not because of, you know, we don't have solid technical experts. It's just when you put more eyes on a project like this, sometimes you'll see opportunities that, you know, don't get seen just with the number of people involved. So, you know, and there's, you know, sometimes it's a more formal value engineering process that you can go through for something like that, or there's other mechanisms, you know, the construction management at risk project delivery method. I think that creates opportunities to bring in other perspectives from the contracting community. And I think there's a lot of merit to that, whether or not, you know, I'm not fully familiar with that project delivery method, and whether or not that provides those additional sets of eyes as we move from the PDR phase going forward. I think it will, whether or not the project is baked enough at that point that they're maybe looking more at the details of the project in terms of their individual areas of expertise as opposed to the bigger picture. So I think just opportunities to continue to look at this from a standpoint of cost management to getting overall best value on the project is kind of where my head's at. And I just, there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than coming up with a great idea on how to make a project more efficient when you're ready to go to construction. And you're like, shit, I wish we had thought of that a year and a half ago, when it would have been a lot more straightforward to implement as compared to, you know, the further you get in the process on these projects, the more locked in you get and the more costly it is to go back and make changes because you've got you're introducing cost penalties and, you know, all kinds of other things that, that, you know, this is the time, if we were gonna do something like that, this is the time to do it, in my opinion. So, I want to throw that, that's more of a process question, and like I said, to go that path, it would take some time in our schedule to do that, and it would take some additional resource, so, if there's, I think, something I'd like to us, and I'm not sure if this is the right meeting for it, but have an opportunity to have a conversation about that.
Let me ask you a question, Dan. What you're talking about, when you talk about getting us another set of eyes to look over the direction we're headed, is that what you're saying?
It could be doing another consultant contract with another consulting company that is brought in so that, you know, they're actually getting paid, put some resource into this, to kind of do a higher level overview of our, you know, the design we've come up with a charge of, look at this design, pressure test it, identify opportunities you see for cost savings or project improvements. Doesn't mean we're going to accept them. You know, it's maybe stuff that the design team has already thought of and recommended against, but it would provide another level of
Security.
well, what's that?
It's like a design audit.
It is. It's just such a major project that
You know, I think what you're touching on, Dan, has some significant validity. However, when we started into this mission, we reviewed consultants and contractors in depth. And what I would be afraid of moving forward with the concept that you're proposing, Dan, would be putting our consultants and our design people in a arena where it becomes a debate over what's best and what's best for the direction for the agency and for the construction team to move this project forward. And I would be hesitant to get involved in a quagmire or a debate process where a consultant team is second guessing who we hired to do the best job possible for the agency. It would create, I'm afraid, even though I agree with what you're saying, would create a stumbling block for us to move forward in a timely manner.
So I appreciate your comments, and doing that kind of process can be, depending on what people's mindsets are when they come into it, whether it's kind of open, because, as you design these projects, you take ownership of them.
Yes, right.
The design team at Scott, they know more about this than anyone. They're making decisions on it. And so for that kind of a process to be successful, there needs to be a willingness by the people with the most ownership to take a step back, be open to input, and to not be defensive through the process. I'm confident with the professionals that we're involved with that wouldn't be an issue. And then at the end of the day, if there's differences of opinion on option A versus option B, ultimately we as the board potentially are the arbiters of that, right? But what it could do is it potentially just further reinforces the confidence that we have that we're going in the right direction. But I'm not talking about taking a step all the way back to what process method are we going to use? That ship has sailed. This is, that was a big picture question, right? 2 years ago, are we going to go with option A or option B or option, we're going to plant rehab, or are we going with option A or option B with, you know, the overall direction of the project. So I'm not saying go back that far. I'm kind of saying, we've got from this level, now we're at this level of detail or the in types of big picture. And I want to, this is the time if we're going to do what, you know, for its term of a design audit or value engineering process, this would be the time to do it.
I don't think it hurts to get some ideas of what that would look like. I mean, we have no clue what it would cost, how
Right.
in-depth it would be,
Right.
what's involved. There's also insurance around these kind of things on project completion that probably needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
But initially at the beginning, there's a whole series of things that can be done here that we can ask management to at least give us an idea of what that could look like.
Yeah, but one of the,
Without making any decisions
yeah,
at the moment.
Yeah, like I say, when we first entered into this, we got the best team that we felt was available at our disposal. And to be able to, second guess our original assessment, I think brings a little bit of, I don't know how to explain it. It leads our consultant and our team to believe that we are not confident in their ability. And I'm very satisfied with the direction we're headed. If it's something that we could do that doesn't interfere with our relationship with our team, I think it's probably a good thing. But I think that there's a real strong possibility with that kind of interfacing with two different teams that it opens a door for potential problems that would delay the project, cost us more money, and interfere with the good relationship we have with our team at the present time.
I get all that. I don't see it as second guess. I see it as validate. And then it's one of those processes that we don't have the expertise. The team does, but we don't. And 100% trust is good, but may not be the right way to go per se.
Okay,
It's not a
if we're willing as an agency to take on that additional cost.
But we don't even know what it would cost. So-
That's the big item.
We need to do some work.
yeah, so let me. I wanted to, yeah, I'll give you, I wanted to get Scott.
I think we're getting a little bit off track here, but one way or another, I think it's worthwhile discussion. Maybe we should save it for another day. It's something, Dan, that you brought up. It has validity, but,
Yeah, I think after we're done with the board comments, I'd be curious to hear from Scott and Tim and other folks that may have been through these types of processes before and get their thoughts on them.
Yeah, so I mean, just sort of gut reaction, I strongly feel the same way as Dale does. My gut reaction is no, I wouldn't want to do it. But I was struggling to find the right words to try and explain why I felt that way, and I'm still not understanding that. But I think that Dale got it, like probably about 75% how I was feeling as well. So anyway, yeah, let's.
Okay, so a couple things. I'll start off by saying it's not, we've done it before as an agency on the last expansion, so I think context is important for the board here. We hired HDR with Smith Bolt Consulting to previously do a value engineering workshop with staff and the agency to evaluate the alternatives for design. So it's totally been done before. And in fact, when we were reaching out to consultants during the RFP phase for this project, there were a lot of consultants that did feel like Rolo was very well positioned, having just come off written study, that they were the best position to win the work. However, they were interested in providing some form of these services to us for this PDR and final design. At that time, staff were not positioned with management to say yes or no. We hadn't had this conversation. But with that said, and to your point, Director Wilkins, I think as long as it's understood, there's controls and boundaries in place between what's available for the limits of the scope of what they would be evaluating versus you're not going back to day one drawing board, like all universal alternatives on the table, but more so we know this is the direction, but can you optimize, enhance, or look for creative strategies for us to better improve these? That's, I think, where the best value for the agency would be at if we went forward with this. But with that, I'll let these guys talk a bit. And Jason, if you want to go next, Jason, or?
No, I would just say, I don't see it qualitatively any issue with it whatsoever. I think it's probably good practice and something, for a lot of different technical functions makes sense. There is challenges, and I think that, there has to be kind of a little bit of a cost benefit analysis done on the benefit of doing it versus the challenges it could potentially create. And there are some costs. I don't think it's deal breaking levels of costs, but, we've got kind of a financial plan based on spend rates, and this will definitely change some of that dynamic a bit. Substantially, I don't know. I don't have that answer. But one of the more challenging aspects is we make decisions as a board and as a management team and staff based on some kind of internally determined values. What types of things were important? There's a phrase that came out of the workshop that Dale attended. He said, failure is not an option. That meant failure is not an option. Staff heard that very, very loud and clear. Corolla staff heard that very, very loud and clear. Does that mean that every risk is mitigated 100%? No, there's no world where that is true, because then the costs are out of control. So now, what we're dealing with is kind of a value, an internal value question more than a monetary value question. So another firm might be like, well, we believe that this is a valid risk, that you are not going to fail your discharge limits, and it'll save you $15 million. Whereas Corolla might say, no, we don't believe that's a valid risk. So then we're kind of at an impasse because we have two SMEs, expert opinions on level of risk. And then, staff are kind of caught in a position where we're like, we value both consultants' opinions. So I would just impossible to overcome? No, but definitely a little bit of an internal challenge. It would make it a little bit more challenging for staff to have kind of consolidated recommendations to go back to the board. But again, I think you're positioning it for more of this is almost someone that works as the board's advocate, more than the staff's advocate, because the way it's couched is kind of a perspective of the board doesn't have the technical expertise to know, maybe, was this a good decision? Was this the best decision? Is this additional cost valuable or worth it? It's almost kind of seems like the board would like to have another representative that kind of has their in account rather than.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you talk to.
Sure, yeah, agreed. So I don't know, again, insurmountable challenges? No challenge is really truly insurmountable,
Yeah.
but it's the value added question.
And I just know I've personally been involved with a lot of projects over a lot of years where I've gotten good input on the project, late in the project, on things that I didn't see when it was my project. I was like, damn it. I wish I'd gotten that person's opinion a year and a half ago, because now that was a great idea, but I'm not in a position to take advantage of it because time has gotten away from time hasn't gotten away from the project. It's moved so far forward. It's no longer, there's no longer an ability really to implement that idea.
That's a point. We do deal with that on the project here currently.
Well, there's just so much going on with this, right?
Yeah.
A lot of mechanical, a lot of electrical.
Well, it is a timing game too, and before we turn it over to them, I will say, I would be concerned about doing what we term pencils down as far as it goes, and parking the design, installing the project, because then we will be at risk of paying them escalators on their design fees,
Right.
and we're going through the construction. So the question would really be, is there anyone that could even spool up quickly enough to find this route to keep the project going while they finalize the PDR, get up to speed, and be ready for the PDR while they're turning around at 30% design in 3 months, right?
So you're talking about October, November timeframe.
For the PDR and a short turnaround for the 30% to keep costs down. But yeah, with that, I'll let you guys jump in.
I'll say a couple of things. I mean, one of the reasons why it brings somebody like Dave on board is he's an independent review of what's going on. I will say this opportunity that you have to go with alternative delivery could mitigate a lot of the concerns that you have. And we're dealing with a project right now, a significant project down in Reno where we're doing CMAR. We brought the contractor in and they've already provided tons of value based on design at 60%. So at this point, everybody's on board, the contractor's on board, Dave's on board, staff's on board, and they're making those changes actively during the projects. In terms of bringing somebody else in, I've seen it work well. I've seen it work really, really badly where it gets to the point where Dale and Director Hansford's concerns are, it happens. You start getting in a pissing match and it doesn't provide value.
Yeah.
So I think the format that we have, the team that we have, and we have an independent contractor and design review, constructability review internally. But if you did decide to take advantage of alternative delivery, you would get that benefit out of it already.
Yeah. So what, I mean, I think what would be helpful to me and I appreciate that. And, there's a lot of attractiveness in my mind to the alternative delivery method. We haven't decided if we're doing that.
Right, and I do have a caveat that I don't know if we can do it. So
Right.
there's been preliminary, very early discussions with Josh regarding SB 598 and whether it could even be applied to this project. So I think we need to have more internal discussions with Josh before we came to the board with the actual feasibility at this stage of it, or if there's any language there. So there's still some ongoing discussions if that's truly on the table. So I do want to caution us on.
Yeah, and then in terms of the potential of it turning into a pissing match, I think that's really on us in terms of how that gets managed, right?
Yeah.
That can happen if it's managed poorly, but if it's managed well, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
I think everyone has great intentions,
yeah,
you talk about the components of this where you can add value, right? It's the design elements that really come down to how do you build it, the ways that things get implemented. And that's where feedback from Dave, feedback from the contractor, I think provide a lot of benefit, because we're not making substantive changes to the processes.
The other thing I'd add to that is I've sub-consulted Corolla after being a contractor for almost over 2 decades. And those internal design debates, they aggressively debate those internally before they're presented to the clients. So I've attended some of those meetings and they have that discussion of, is this the best way to go? And they really bring it out good. The one other thing I would add, it's well recognized in the industry, and it's quick, it doesn't disrupt time if you want to consider it, is they're called 40-hour VE workshops. And there's actually VE facilitators that serve the industry.
Yeah.
I was involved in the Echo Water program, which was $1 billion, Sacramento Regional. Pro got more design work there than any other engineer, but every contract had to have a workshop. And I attended every one of those workshops as the contractor in the room, pricing the ideas for possible savings. It's quick. It's you select the design engineer for each. You set the best electrical design engineer, the best process, and that's the team. And they have 1 week. It starts on Monday. Rolla would present where they are.
Yeah.
And on Friday, they present their ideas and you're done.
Yeah.
But you don't do it typically at PDR. You do it at either 30 or 50% design. So they have something really tangible to look at. Having said that, at Echo Water, I don't know what all that cost them, but the results were minimal, really. But somebody used the word validated, it validated. So it's real quick, it wouldn't disrupt time. Might be the answer to what you're thinking.
The way I look at it, we spent $19.7 million on design.
18.7.
haven't overrun yet.
19.7. At the present time, they better know what they're doing.
Yeah, you're,
They better know what they're doing.
we haven't spent that much yet, though.
we're getting close.
Liz would like us to.
All right, let's move on. Any other comments from the board here?
Okay.
All right, This is only a presentation, so.
When are we gonna have a camp meeting or a meeting like you discussed there, Jason, about all of us getting together for a few hours and really digesting this?
End of August. End of
August?
Yeah,
Okay.
end of August.
After you go to the beach again.
And Dan, I know this is not necessarily board direction, but we will do a little bit more research, on kind of what are the variations, what does this look like? And if the board has any desire in the future to do a little bit more thorough.
And when,
And
I think
correct,
that's a big,
correct. I mean, they're
I'm hearing here it'd be too early now, but
correct.
With that 2 hour, it's early, we're gonna do want to bring on the peer review portion more so than.
Yeah, we're talking design elements versus cost elements. And so there's a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces. So
And I know you all have developed relationships with other plant operators or in the, really in the western US at this point.
Yeah.
Some of them which have done major plant projects recently, and maybe that's a starting point, let's see if they.
I'll tell you, most of the ones that we've spoken to, that are not in California,
Yeah,
alternative project delivery has been there.
right.
Plus,
And,
but
and quite frankly, if that's an option for us, that's very attractive to me. And I think maybe some of the importance to this other
yeah,
stuff may be diminished because you do get that, those additional eyes in the project through that method.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're not sure if that is possible.
There's specific language requirements in SB 598 that we have to talk about with Josh to see if it would include us or allow us to do. So.
yeah, let's figure that out.
Yep.
Let's find a way to make it. Yeah, I hear you, but we're
Yeah, Josh.
turned out. Pave a new road.
Hiding in the TV.
All right, let's move on to the, thank you, Scott. Your short.
15 minutes.
We good?
Yeah.
We're gonna move to the OPEB retirement, retiree premium reimbursement. Did this last year, so I'll do it again this year, it's a smaller number. Finance committee has looked at it. The main reason we're going forward is we believe over the long term, this is the right answer, given the urgency of going where we expect that town to go. Over to you, on things evolution.
I liked your presentation. I thought it was pretty concise.
Well, then vote. I vote yes.
I'll throw a couple numbers in there. We did take a look at the evaluation at the June Finance Committee meeting. We discussed the increase in the total OPEB liability. These will fluctuate from year to year. There were some nuances for this year. The direction from the committee is that we want to continue to take this reimbursement so that we are being appropriate with our finances. We spend about $1 million in retiree healthcare every year. As we noted at budget time, that will increase. This trust was set aside and built in 2008 to pay for these very expenses right now. So we're really just doing what the agency planned to do all of those years ago. The action for this year from the PECTA contribution, PECTA is the projected employer contribution. It's a letter that our actuaries write to us that say, you could do this or you could do nothing. Again, Finance Committee decided that we wanted to take a recommendation to the board. But what the valuation tells us and what's considered in the PECTA is what money do we need to continue to put in this trust today for those of us that are working right now that will get that benefit when we're eligible for it? How do we bridge that gap for that new liability that grew? And then how much can we take out for our retiree premiums? We net all those numbers together and this year it comes to $433 million. It was about $585,000 last year. Did I say? You said really? Okay, I was like, yeah, thanks. That would be amazing. Let me try again. It's $433,000 this year, and it was $585,000 last year. Costs are increasing, our contribution required for us is increasing, that's the amount we can take back out is good. That's the long and short of it. I will toss in there we're 92% funded. That's a great story. There's tons of agencies in California that are like 50% funded. So in 2008, you all did the agency and the employees a solid. So thank you for that.
All set?
We're ready to do
All right.
all the recommended action you are.
Okay, I so
Second,
All right, I'm so moving. Thank you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Okay, at this point, we're gonna turn it over to Josh to tell us about how the legal environment is affecting us. Over to you, Josh. Maybe.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Josh.
Almost like the meeting, Josh.
So the legislature, as always, was busy last year, and they did create some new governance requirements. Mainly, that's really the focus of today's discussion. And particularly, we had SB 707, which is a Brown Act bill. There was SB 852, which deals with financial training. And then, I'm sorry, SB 827 is the financial training. And then SB 852 was the Form 700 FPPC issue. So I'll take each of these in turn, starting with SB 707. This is the one that deals with the Brown Act. We had a number of components that were changed in the Brown Act. It was, originally billed as a modernization and overhaul of the Brown Act. It didn't quite get there in the sense that it didn't touch every part of the Brown Act. There were a number of things that associations like CSDA and Aqua were hoping to change and modernize more completely. Didn't quite happen. As usual, the legislature had to deal with competing interests. And so what we came up with were some changes that recognize, for example, a court case that came out of Berkeley a couple of years ago, and that's a change where now a director who is disabled can use remote participation as a disability accommodation. Under this prong, the director can participate at any time for any number of meetings. They just need to let the board know that they're planning on doing that. When they participate, there's no requirement anymore that they post a agenda at the location. They do need to disclose that if there's anyone over the age of 18 in the room, who that is, and briefly the relationship. They're supposed to have a two-way audio and visual platform, although if for a disability accommodation reason, they don't want to use video, they don't have to use the video, but you definitely need to maintain an audio connection both ways. The next major change was a kind of a consolidation of existing emergency and just cause participation. If you recall, there was a previous bill 2449, which originally put the just cause and emergency exemptions into place for meeting participation. Those were essentially consolidated into now what's just called a just cause exception. Under this, and I just want to back up and remind everybody the existing, what we call traditional teleconference rules that directors use, for example, when they're away on business or on vacation. Those rules continue to remain in effect and still need to be used when you're taking some kind of discretionary leave to go on vacation or you're away on business. You still have to comply with those traditional rules. But under the new teleconferencing provisions for just cause, you can use those up to 2 times a year. Essentially, they collapse this into any kind of personal illness, family illness, kin care, child care. These can all be a potential just cause exemption. If you want to use these 1 to 2 times a year, You just need to inform Rochelle or the board president prior to the meeting or at the time of the meeting. And again, you have to disclose if there's anyone over 18 in the room and let everybody know very briefly what the relationship is. You also have to very briefly and without, violating HIPAA essentially, describe why you're taking the just cause exemption. In addition to that, there were a couple of other changes under this prong. The current rules were that if there was a state emergency declared, you could also have remote participation. In fact, you could conduct the whole meeting remotely. This bill also now provides if there's a local emergency declared by a jurisdictional city or county, that you can hold the meeting for a local emergency as a remote meeting. So this does extend that to that extent. I'll also note that to the extent there are any standing committees, you can now have standing committees meet remotely. There are some rules around this. You have to have a physical location, i.e. the boardroom. At least one member of staff needs to be in that physical location and operate the meeting. But the directors can participate remotely. This does require posting of agendas. So that's an option as well. There were some more minor changes to the Brown Act as well. The first one that kind of falls under this more incremental type of change. There is now a requirement, it's always been best practice, but it's now required that each member of the legislative body receives a copy of the Brown Act. So, in the past, a lot of agencies would provide a new member board packet or something like that with the Brown Act in it. That was purely discretionary, but again, it is now a requirement for any newly elected or appointed member of a governing board. If the agency hasn't done this, then everyone should receive a copy of the Brown Act from staff. The next one is there was some clarification of how you deal with disruptions of board meetings by members of the public. There were some holes in these rules that made it a little bit difficult to administer them. Now it's very clear if there's a disruption, the board president can clear the room and prevent the people who have been disruptive from coming back. The next one is one that frankly, most clients never have really invoked. It's been around for a while and in a certain form, but now you can, if something was in a committee and that was a noticed committee meeting and the public came to hear an item that's later pushed up to the board and they were provided the opportunity to provide public comment. Technically, you don't have to provide a second round of public comment at the board meeting when the committee reports. As a practical matter, I don't know of any client that has ever cut off public comment on any item on a board meeting agenda. And frankly, this one's not really a best practice. And my advice would be to continue to provide public comment on every item, whether it's been to a noticed in public committee meeting or not. And then finally, on SB 707, the other major issue that was dealt with was the existing social media rules that allow board members to engage in conversations via social media with constituents and members of the public. Those were supposed to sunset at the beginning of this year. That sunset was removed permanently, so those rules are now permanent. And with that, I will stop. Happy to take any questions from the board on this particular item.
So Josh, what were you saying on the social media that what has sunset? I didn't quite catch that.
The rules were supposed to sunset, Director Hansford, as of the beginning of this year, but that sunset was removed, so the rules are now permanent. So you have the ability to have social media conversations on agency matters with your constituents and members of the public. As a reminder, the platform has to be something that only one director at a time uses. There can't be, what amounts to a serial meeting by having two or more directors actually on the same conversation with constituents. It's pretty much a member to public kind of deal.
Thank you.
No other comments here. Go ahead.
Okay. I will just briefly point out that there was a whole nother set of rules that were applied to what are called eligible legislative bodies. Essentially, these are very large agencies that have very large budgets or very large populations. The agency doesn't come anywhere close to qualifying under these rules, but there were a number of additional limitations that have to do with noticing meetings and public comment and so on, but those rules are irrelevant to T-TSA. So the next item is SB 827. These are the fiscal training requirements. As the board knows, you currently are required to have ethics training every 2 years. This bill extended the ethics training to include your chief executive officer and your managers, essentially. So in the past, the board could discretionarily say that certain executive or managerial employees had to take ethics training, but now it's required. But more importantly, there's a new requirement for fiscal and financial training. It's supposed to apply to anyone who has investment or budget authority of some sort. So this applies both to the board members as well as to department heads, finance officer, and executive level staff. Like the ethics training, you're required to have 2 hours every 2 years. The first round of training needs to be completed by board members by January 1 of 2028. And like ethics training, the requirement's pretty flexible. You can do it by way of a seminar or a workshop, a webinar, a smaller group, or self-study. So there are a number of options for how you do this. But, the legislature in its infinite wisdom decided that you needed to have yet more training requirements. So here we are with that. And then the last major item is SB 852. And this one is really centered around the filing of Form 700s. And I will note here that, T-TSA is a multi-jurisdictional agency, and under the existing rules, Technically, you've always been under the FPPC's purview in terms of your conflict of interest code and your filing, but in the past, the FPPC allowed local agencies to manage that by themselves and didn't require filing with the FPPC directly. That was an option, but not a requirement. What SB 852 changes is that for all what we call statutory filers who are considered to manage public investments, you now have to file your Form 700s through a portal directly with the FPPC. In addition, there's a new requirement that investment management consultants also file. So, for example, if you have an outside firm that has some sort of independent or delegated management over your investments or authority to invest your money, the folks at those firms who you work with are now deemed to be investment management consultants, and they too are supposed to start filing Form 700s, and those will also need to be filed directly with the FPPC. One thing to note here is that this requirement actually took effect on January 1st of this year, and technically everyone that was covered by this was supposed to file this year with the FPPC. That didn't happen for a number of reasons. The legislature, of course, didn't provide any kind of period to get this all up and running. The FPPC didn't even have their portal in place. There was a confusion at the county level for agencies that file through counties. So essentially, everybody filed as normal this year. We don't anticipate any kind of blowback or issue with the FPPC about this. The FPPC recognizes they were behind the 8 ball as well. So this requirement will really start on Jan 1 of 2027 for the Jan 1 to April 1 filing period for 2026 Form 700s. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on SB 827 or SB 852 before moving on to the last few items.
I have a question. So is Michelle gonna babysit us on making sure we get our Form 700s in for T-TSA?
Will the rest of us.
Okay, well.
I like
Also, it's different training. It's a different training.
Yeah.
I'll send you reminders about that, and then also for the trainings, for your additional fiscal financial training. There was one recently, but CSDA has the free online webinar trainings for those two. Usually after they have one in person or online, it takes a couple of weeks for them to upload them, but then they'll have an event. And also the town is having their normal annual or biannual ethics training in July. And our agency also does online training for that for our internal employees, but we can always sign you up for that through CSD if you no longer get it through work or through your agency boards as well. I know Scott right now is the only one who's not an official board member. He's an appointed member. So we handle that for him for his training, but if you need it as well, we can.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, the last round here are just some other bills in general law that I just want to cover real briefly. The first one's AB 538. This one follows on an existing requirement, and it involves the Public Records Act. The current requirements are in public works projects that your contractors maintain certified payroll records in a certain format. that are supervised by the Department of Labor Standards Enforcement in the DIR. As we always understood the Public Records Act, if a member of the public filed a request with the agency for these certified payrolls, you were obligated to obtain them from the contractor. Apparently, some other agencies or lawyers took a different view. So AB 538 now makes it clear that the agency that receives a request like this is required to go to the contractor and obtain those payrolls and produce them as to the member of the public that requests them. The other thing that clearly wasn't in the law previously and could sometimes be a problem is the contractors would drag their feet. It would take a while to get these records. Now, AB 538 makes it clear that the contractor has 10 days to provide these records to the public agency so they can produce them. So that's a new requirement, and there are penalties, misdemeanor charges that can be levied if a contractor fails to comply or the agency fails to provide. The next bill is SB 499. This bill really is more of a requirement for land use agencies. It's a clarification of development fee collection timing. For T-TSA, this really doesn't have a direct impact. The bill made it clear in a carve out that water and wastewater agencies still have the ability to collect connection fees and capacity fees and similar fees on essentially the timeline they fix as opposed to the timelines imposed on the land use agencies under the existing Mitigation Fee Act and Subdivision Map Act and now SB 499 requirements. Next bill, AB 130 and SB 131. These were termed CEQA reform bills. They strengthen exemptions for certain infill and affordable housing projects. Again, these don't necessarily have a lot of direct impact on T-TSA as a local utility agency. These are more keyed toward land use agencies, cities and counties, and making sure that they're able to timely process development applications and so on. And the last item isn't a legislative issue so much, but there has been a pending federal requirement that public agencies get into compliance with accessibility, ADA accessibility requirements for their websites. The good news here is that the DOJ extended the timeline for local agencies like T-TSA to comply with these rather complex and what are going to be somewhat expensive rules to make your websites fully accessible. There are requirements for making sure that PDFs, certain PDFs and other documents on your websites are fully accessible. This now is a requirement that will take effect in April of 2027. So there's time for T-TSA and other local agencies to comply with this one. And with that, I'm finished unless there are any questions.
Questions? Everybody's very excited about the new legislation. Thank you, Josh. We appreciate that. It's always good to
Thank
be
you.
kept up to speed and make sure we train ourselves and keep training and training and training. Appreciate that. All right.
Thank you, Josh.
Department reports. Ops department goes first, I think. And you don't have 15 minutes. 15 minutes? No, I'm gonna make it.
Give her a quick.
We're gonna tell him 5 from now on.
I mean, is it for Scott 15 minutes?
It's a normal. It's a normal.
He's got a cool picture.
Morning, board of directors, myself, the operations department manager. For the operations department for the last month, all the plant, waste discharge requirements were met for the month. Most important thing. For the operations department update, we conducted inspection of fine filter number 4. We added required media and scheduled some necessary repairs in that filter. Operations staff toured the San Francisco biosolids digester facility project as part of an ongoing training in industrial benchmarking. We completed a full plant shutdown to perform electrical preventative maintenance and system inspections. We took the activated sludge system side 1 out of service to support repairs of the primary 1 effluent gate and an associated bypass gate that we have there at the facility. As you can see, our average flows, peak flow for the month, 5.16, met the discharge requirements for WDRs. And next slide, please. Ooh, we got a big delay. Oh.
How long can we do a complete plant shutdown for?
Well, it was just for one side. We took it out of service and then so we put the, for the electrical, we've done them up to 16 to 18 hours before where we shut the whole plant down. The activated sludge slow down, but once we put the system back in service and we get the bugs going again, get them some oxygen, they take that off. So we can flow down and we bypass to our emergency storage or equalization storage facility while we're doing that. So, and then we bring that water back and treat it once the plant's back. So, yeah. But this was to facilitate some repairs. We just needed to drop all the power that runs everything. So, no, that's okay. So basically that was a photo of inside filter number 4. And it was just showing the surface wash arm, some of the nozzles were plugged and stuff. That was some of the repairs that we're going to be facilitating. Next reading.
It said play and that sounds like. Yeah. Oh, no. What are you doing?
We have to start over.
Around 2.
Yeah.
Call it dude. Anyway, the next photo is a photo of clean water system that we saw at the San Francisco plant that they had just done as part of their expansion project that they did for their digesters. This is something that we're going to be looking at probably on a smaller scale, but this is the type of a cooling system that we're going to be looking at for our digested sludge after the MagPrep system, which removes the phosphorus to remove the struvite or at least lower the chances of precipitating struvite. We're going to be looking at something like this. Then that sludge would go to our centrifuges and we could do our dewatering. Next slide. This was just the downstairs galley in one of their digester, in their digester facility. Their digesters, I think, were, correct me if I'm wrong, 1.5 or 2 million gallons each.
Oh, sorry,
Digesters. You remember? I think there were 1.5 million gallons.
Yeah, it sounds like
They're
something.
pretty large and they had 5 of them. But the downstairs is really nice because of the way the digesters were shaped, you get the grid out and stuff without actually having to go inside and have a type of way to clean the grid out, which we have to actually do entry, but so, new facilities are always fun to see before they operate. Do I have one more?
She's gonna try one more time with the video for you, Michael.
Not actually moving.
If the nozzle works correctly, the arm actually moves when the nozzle is working correctly, so it just surface washes that. And I got to scare Scott, so that was my favorite part. Other than that, is there any questions for the operations department building?
That might go from the beginning, though.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Something.
Mr. Maintenance, up to you.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
Walsh House Maintenance Manager, good morning. It's been a long day, so we'll try to.
Only 11:20.
I think we're good.
All right, so as you usually see for the month of May, the typical projects, digestion improvements, clean water revitalization, ITOT to main controller split. We did make some additional changes recently, so that is going well. Network upgrade project, as well as the SCADA upgrade project, which you'll be hearing more about in the coming months. Maintenance activities for the month. These are just some of the notable tasks. I'll touch on a handful. We replaced a heat exchanger on the backup generator at building number 27. We replaced an actuator and sluice gate valve on North O2 basin. We'll have some pictures on that later. We replaced one of the major blowers, number 5, repaired a PVC line for the chiller HVAC cooling water, which is helping us cool this building today. It's out back here. We did some mastication, got a picture of one of the pieces of equipment out there, Pond A and Pond B. We're trying to keep the trees from destroying the underground infrastructure out there, so the roots and whatnot, so just get those things out of there. We did perform the plant shutdown. Thank you to operations for the assistance with that. We cleaned some electrical vaults and we pulled a manual through some of the conduits out there for another future project for the network upgrades. We completed our TRI flow study and we attended a training class in Fresno as well as some arc flash training. All right. Typical stuff with the work orders, nothing too earth shattering here we're staying about level, only a slight increase month over month, but nothing to be too concerned about at the moment. All right, we'll get to some pictures here. There's the old valve on the left, the old bypass gate. On the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, you see the bypass gate actuator that we were installing. Both electrical and mechanical teams on that. Next picture. All right, that's the electrical vault cleaning. We needed to de-energize the plant for that, just because we had staff down in that vault and interacting with that electrical just would have been a safe experience. And we decided to err on the side of caution. Even though those are insulated, we decided to be safe, as safe as we could. So, and here we also have another picture of the conduit cleaning and the mandrel to the right there at the bottom lower right hand corner there. That's the heat exchanger for the generator. That's that aging generator that Scott was talking about in building 27. We are getting more failures on it. That's all there is to it. But it is an old generator. It still runs. We're keeping it up and running. But as anything that ages, it's going to take more Band-Aids. So it's going to fail more often and become more expensive to maintain. And there's a picture of some of our contractor out there doing some of the tree removal out there at this photo field. So it's a pretty large trees out there that haven't been touched in many years. So, any questions? Thank you.
Plumbing again, I don't really have any major updates for technical services department, so other than what was bulleted in there and some work packet, any questions on tech services?
Well done,
He's not joking.
All right.
You beat Michael, yeah. Well, I'm here to carry us through the noon hour, just kidding. I will tell you that we did the things, but not everyone likes that part. So from a risk and safety perspective, we attended safety day, around with some friends around the lake. We did our quarterly safety meeting and we did PPE and heat awareness training because guess what? It's getting hot. So good time to remind everyone. On the finance side, the biggest thing is that we completed our interim audit. You'll notice I keep inching that back earlier and earlier so we can get an earlier audit delivery. On the billing customer service side, there were no commercial inspections. It happens some months. On the billing customer service side, but with her additional duties, she assisted Dr. Summit P with our Prop 218 protest. Great learning opportunity for us. Get experience to get out in the market, as I call it. And we're also completing the rate study RFPs. Last thing, purchasing was finalizing the FY 27 chemical contracts with the department. That's what I got. Questions?
All right. Over to you, Jason. Right, bud.
Yeah, it's, you know, the big stuff's in the board packet. I will point out a couple things. I attended the financial training. I would highly recommend if you can find a way to do it in person because there is about half the content that I got that came from questions that were asked by board members that were present from other agencies. So just, you know, food for thought, you can do the online version, but the in-person is a lot better. Also, I just kind of want to expand, you guys get to see a lot of the end product from the management department, WT Scott, you know, the amount of bandwidth that this team is absorbing and putting out at the moment is truly impressive. And I don't know if that always comes off. I just want to thank them for everything they do. And, you know, the facility continues to run, continues to be maintained. We have plans for the future and we can afford to pay for all of them. So that doesn't come from me, that comes from them. And I just wanted, again, to the board, point out how much I appreciate the staff. So that's what I have. Do you have any questions about anything that was in the meeting?
No questions. All right, board of director comments.
I got a question,
I didn't ask you a question.
I just wanted to know if there has been any interest in our surplus land sales or any positive feedback on what we got going on?
Yeah, we're continuing to move forward on getting something to present to the board with Chuck Donner Beauty. That still has not gone away. We are continuing forward with that. There's a lot of red tape, a lot of corporations and some land related stuff, but we're working through it and we should have something to you. I'm not going to give you a timeline, but it's definitely a continued focus of mine.
And we